Hare Krishna, welcome to this special program on the systematic study of the topmost revealed scripture in the entire world, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we begin today's session, I shall chant a few prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadeshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'd like to invite all the viewers and welcome them to this special program on the systematic study of the topmost revealed scripture in the entire world, the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam contains a total of 12 cantos, 335 chapters and 18,000 shlokas. It is the cream of all Vedic knowledge and the essence of all Vedic wisdom. We have already completed the study and analysis of the first 4 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and today we shall take up the study of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. The 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam contains 26 chapters and 668 shlokas or verses. The main subject matter or the content of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the narration of the wonderful histories of the family descendants of the great personality Swayambhuva Manu, especially of King Priyavrata, the eldest son of Swayambhuva Manu. So we find the very beautiful narration of the history of King Priyavrata and later of Maharaja Agnidra, and after that of Maharaja Nabhi, and after that we find the wonderful description of another incarnation, Avatara of the Supreme Lord Vishnu by name Rishabha Deva. And we also find in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam the fascinating history of Bharat Maharaj in his 3 lives. And after that we also have the very wonderful and captivating information about the exact structure of the entire universe, the entire Brahmanda, and how all the planetary systems are located in this universe. So the universal structure is explained both on the horizontal platform as well as on the vertical level or in the vertical plane. So this is the main subject matter of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So let us start from the very beginning, from the first chapter of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that contains the very beautiful history of a very great personality by name Priyavrata. So Swayambhuva Manu, the first Manu of the universe, had 5 children, 2 sons Priyavrata and Uttanapada, and 3 daughters by name Devahuti, Akuti and Prasuti. We have already heard the history of these personalities, including Uttanapada and his descendants, and likewise of Devahuti, Akuti and Prasuti. Now, Shukadeva Goswami is going to explain the history of the first son of Swayambhuva Manu by name Priyavrata. It is also interesting to note here that originally King Priyavrata had taken the path of renunciation under the guidance and instruction of the great sage Narada Muni, and had gone to the Gandhamadana Parvata to perform severe penance and austerities. So now Parikshit Maharaj inquired from Shukadeva Goswami that after giving up the material path of life, how is it that Priyavrata again returned back? It is something like a degradation, it is like a demotion. So always we should aim towards advancing on the spiritual path. So how is it that Priyavrata, after giving up material life and dedicating himself to spiritual life, why did he again come back to become a king and rule over the world? Actually, because Priyavrata had gone away to the forest, to the mountains to practice tapasya, his younger brother, that is Uttanapada, had become the king. But after the passing away of Uttanapada and all the glorious descendants of their family, there was a great need for a qualified, a suitable king or ruler over this world. And at that time, the most suitable candidate, the most eligible person to rule over the world was none other than Priyavrata, who was practicing tapasya, penance in the Gandhamadana Parvata mountain under the instruction and tutelage of the great sage Narada Muni. So, anyone who is under the instruction and guidance of Narada is very firmly and strongly fixed on the path of spiritual life, and it is most difficult to shake them from their determination to pursue the ultimate path of spiritual life. So now this was a very challenging task for Swayambhuva Manu and all the great personalities of this universe to convince Priyavrata to take on the responsibility to rule over this world. So therefore, because Narada is such a potent spiritual master, so to take away someone from his shelter is very, very difficult. So therefore now Swayambhuva Manu personally came to the location where Priyavrata was performing austerities and penance, and at that time to assist him for the benefit of the people of this world, Lord Brahma, accompanied by all the devatas and by all the great sages, everyone came, descended on that spot at that location, and on one side are Priyavrata and Narada, and on the other side all these great personalities of the universe, trying to convince Priyavrata to take up the responsibility of becoming the emperor and king and rule over the world. So although Priyavrata was very hesitant and reluctant, by the order of these superior personalities, especially Lord Brahma had personally come to convince him. So then also finally even Narada relented for the benefit of the entire world, and thus Priyavrata returned back to his kingdom, to the palace, and assumed the responsibilities of a king. And he was one of the most glorious Raja Rishis, or great kings who were thoroughly devoted to the spiritual culture of life. And Priyavrata himself, being a pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, could also engage the mass of people, the citizens, on this highest path of spiritual culture. In course of time, Priyavrata he had two wives. He first married the daughter of Vishwakarma, the universal architect, whose name is Barhishmati. And Priyavrata and Barhishmati in course of time had 10 sons by name Agnidra, Idmajihva, Yagnabahu, Mahavira, Hiranyareta, Ghritaprishta, Savana, Medhatithi, Vitihotra, and Kavi. They also had one daughter by name Urjaswati, and in this way Maharaj Priyavrata lived with his wife for a very long duration of time and brought the best kind of rule in the history of mankind. There are many verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam glorifying the saintly character of Priyavrata Maharaj and also his extraordinary deeds in dividing the earthly realm into the 7 planets, into the 7 parts, into 7 islands, which would be described in the later section of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam in the analysis of the structure of the entire universe. So these various divisions of the Sapta Dvipas, the 7 islands and the 7 oceans, was done single-handedly by Maharaj Priyavrata. In fact, during his reign, he surpassed even the splendor of Surya or of the sun. So such are the glories of Maharaj Priyavrata. He also married another wife, through whom he begot 3 very wonderful and great sons by name Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata, who became later on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Manus. The first Manvantara is called Swayambhuva Manvantara, the second one is called Swaroshisha Manvantara, and the third one is called Uttama, the fourth one is Tamasa, and the fifth one is Raivata, the sixth one is Chakshusha, and the seventh one, the current one, is known as Vaivasvata. So the third, fourth, and fifth Manus, Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata, all 3 of them are the sons of Maharaj Priyavrata. So in this way, after ruling for a very long time, Maharaj Priyavrata again he went away to the forest and again completely dedicated himself to the spiritual path of pure bhakti, devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, and went back home, back to Godhead. This is the standard of the Rajarshis, of the great kings of yore, who would dedicate their life, especially after some time, to pursue the path of spiritual perfection, and many of them have attained the ultimate perfection of the human form of life. So after Maharaj Priyavrata, the next king became the eldest son of Priyavrata by name Agnidra. So Agnidra became the next king, and after some time King Agnidra he had many children, many sons, out of whom the eldest son is named Nabhi, and Nabhi married Meru Devi. And it is also stated earlier in the second canto, 7th chapter, text number 10, that Nabhi rasav Rishabha asa sudevi sunur yo vai chachara samadrik jada yoga charyam दृष्ट्वात्मनो भगवतो नियमावलोकं देव्यस्त्वनङ्गपृतनाघटितुं न शेकुः यत्पारमहंस्य विषयपदमामनन्ति स्वस्थप्कशान्तकर्णः परिमुक्तसङ्गः. Nabhi and Meru Devi performed once a very great sacrifice in which appeared the Supreme Lord. First, all the various devatas came to the sacrifice and personally took their share of the offerings of the sacrifice, and finally the Supreme Lord Vishnu himself appeared in the sacrificial arena of King Nabhi. And at that time, the priests who were performing the sacrifice on behalf of King Nabhi expressed the deep desire of King Nabhi to the Supreme Lord, that King Nabhi here desires to have a son like you, like the Supreme Lord. So then the Supreme Lord Vishnu replied that I am known in all the Vedas, in all the scriptures as Asamogdva. There is none who is equal or superior to me, and therefore if Nabhi decides to have a son like me, I am unparalleled. There is no one comparable to me, and therefore to fulfill that desire, the only way is if I have to appear. And because King Nabhi is also a pure devotee, I shall definitely descend as his son. So Lord Vishnu blessed King Nabhi that he would soon appear as an incarnation as his son. And that incarnation of the Supreme Lord Vishnu as the son of Nabhi and Meru Devi is the incarnation, the avatara known as Rishabha Deva. King Rishabha Deva or Rishabha Bhagavan is also regarded as the first, the original Supreme Personality of Godhead as Bhagavan, even by all the followers of Jainism. So although later the original teachings of Lord Rishabhadeva were neglected by the subsequent followers of Jainism and the Tirthankaras, but here in the Srimad Bhagavatam we find the original teachings of Maharaj Rishabhadeva or Rishabha Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After some time, when Rishabhadeva became the king, he accepted a wife by name Jayanti. Rishabha married Jayanti and they had 100 sons. And out of these 100 sons, 9 of them became Paramahamsas, or they became the pure, they pursued the pure path of Paramahamsagati, and they are known as the Navayogendras. And later in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find the teachings of the Navayogendras in the assembly of the Yadus. The eldest son of Maharaj Rishabha and the best among the 100 sons of King Rishabhadeva is Bharat Maharaj. Bharata is the great king after whom our land, our entire Varsha is known as Bharatavarsha. The earthly realm is also known as the Bhumandala, has Sapta Dvipas, and the central Dvipa is known as Jambu Dvipa, and in Jambu Dvipa there are 9 Vakshas, and the southernmost of the Vakshas, of the 9 Vakshas, is Bharata Vaksha. So Bharata Vaksha is named after King Bharata, the son of Maharaj Rishabha or Rishabha Avatara. So after some time, we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that one day Rishabha Avatara, Lord Rishabha, called his sons, all his 100 sons, and gave his most valuable teachings. And these are recorded in the 5th chapter of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the teachings of Lord Rishabha are very, very beautifully recorded here, and these are very, very important instructions for the spiritual upliftment of the entire humanity. The first instruction given by Lord Rishabha is in 5.5.1 as Rishabha uvacha nayam deho deha bhaja nriloke kashtan kaman arhate vidbhujami tapo divyam putraka yena sattvam shuddhir yasmad brahma saukhyam tvanantam. Na ayam deha, this human form of life is especially not meant for the material pursuits and the animal propensities of eating, sleeping, mating and defending. In the scriptures it is said that all the activities of sense gratification are fully available even in the animal kingdom. They can happily eat, they can sleep, they can mate, they can defend. So ahara nidra bhayamaithunam cha samanyame pashubhi naranam. These things of material life, of eating, sleeping, mating, defending, having a family life and take care of these things are common even among the animals with the human beings. So what is it that is extraordinary or special or unique for the human beings? There may be many special things like we have linguistics, we have many languages with which we communicate, we have many advanced branches of knowledge in science and mathematics, and we have developed many kinds of arts and culture. So there are many things which are special to the human beings, but something is very, very unique for the human beings which sets them apart from all the other living beings, and that is the only opportunity to attain in the human form of life the practice of spiritual values and spiritual practices to attain freedom from the cycle of birth and death, to attain moksha, liberation, and go back to the spiritual world, the eternal kingdom of the Supreme Lord of God. So therefore, Rishabhadeva instructs all his sons and all of us that the purpose of the human form of life is not to engage in the animal propensities of sense gratification. That is available, Lord Rishabha says, even to vidbhujami. Vid means stool and filthy things. So even to pigs who eat stool and filthy things, even they have ample sense gratification in the form of eating, mating, sleeping and all these things. So what is unique, what is special, what is the most important thing for a human being? That is stated by Rishabhadeva here, that it is tapo divyam putrakayena sattvam, that in the human form of life one should practice penance, tapasya, the spiritual kind of devotional tapasya by which sattvam shuddhyet, we become purified of all material contamination, by which Brahma Saukhyam tu Anantam, we can attain to infinite bliss and spiritual happiness. So, we should understand here that spiritual life is not some kind of a dry practice without any happiness, without any bliss, without any kind of enjoyment. Actually, initially, yes, there is a tapasya. Tapasya means the voluntary acceptance of some inconvenience or hardship. Just like a child may want to play the whole day, but the parents would make the child study for attaining a higher goal in life. Likewise, so that is called tapasya. Although it is not so favorable, but still voluntarily for a higher purpose we accept some inconvenience or hardship. Likewise, tapasya or penance is the voluntary acceptance of some inconvenience for attaining a higher or the highest purpose in life. So the human form of life is meant for this, so that by such form of penance and austerity one's heart becomes purified and one can attain eternal, infinite, blissful spiritual existence in the spiritual realm. He further instructs that Mahat Sevam Dvaramahur Vimuktehe Tamodvaram Yoshitam Sangi Sangam Mahantaste Samachitta Prashanta Vimanyava Suhrida Sadhavo Ye. That Mahat Sevam Dvaramahur Vimuktehe, the door to liberation, which is the goal of life, which is the objective, the purpose of the human form of life. The door to liberation is opened by association with pure devotees, with the saintly persons. And the door to degradation, the door to the hellish existence is opened by association with lusty people who are filled with lust and greed and anger. As also stated in the Bhagavad Gita 16th chapter, Krishna says that the Trividham Narakasyedam Dwaram Mokshanam Atmanaha Kamaha Krodhastatha Lobhaha Tasmad Etatrayam Tyajet. There are three royal gates to hell, which are Kama, Krodha and Lobha, lust, anger and greed. So, therefore, even to associate with people who are lusty, filled with anger and very greedy in nature leads a person to a hellish condition of life. And on the contrary, association with saintly people, with the sadhus, with the devotees, with the bhaktas is the doorway that opens the path to liberation. He further says that in fact the culture of spiritual life is so important that Pumsaha striya mithuni bhavametam tayor mitho hridaya granthi mahuhu ato griha kshetra sutapta vitter janasya mohoyam aham mameti. The basic cause of material bondage is the attraction between male and female. This is the basic principle of material existence, and on this misconception which ties the hearts of various living beings, one becomes more and more entangled to the material conceptions of I and mine, like body, home, property, children, relatives and wealth. And in this way one falls into the material whirlpool of this samsara. So in this way, Lord Rishabha gives many valuable instructions in 5.5.18, Lord Rishabha gives this very, very important instruction that one should take the spiritual culture of life as the prime, as the most important principle in life, and otherwise one should not even accept a superior role either of a spiritual master or a father or a mother or any such role. Lord Rishabha says in this instruction that Gurur na sasyad, swajano na sasyad, pita na sasyad, janani na sasyad, daivam na tatsyad, na patishcha sasyad, namo chayedya samupeta mrityum. One should not become a guru, a spiritual master, a pita, a father, a mata, a mother, or a pati, a husband, or a devata, or a worshipable devata or demigod, unless one is capable of delivering the dependence from the cycle of birth and death. So unless one has the capacity and capability of showing the path of moksha or liberation to one's dependents, like the disciple or the children or the worshipper or the wife, one should not accept the superior role. So such is the great responsibility entrusted on the people who take up the role of guiding their dependents, guiding those who depend upon them. After giving these very, very important instructions, Lord Rishabha then he retired and he came wandering to the states of, it is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that he came to Andhra, Konka, Venka and Karnataka. He came to Karnataka, and there finally Lord Rishabhadeva, he went back to the spiritual world. The Supreme Lord Rishabhadeva in his incarnations performed many superhuman activities which are never to be imitated by ordinary human beings. So these are extraordinary activities performed by Lord Rishabhadeva as the perfect renunciant, as the perfect avadhuta. So after the disappearance of Lord Rishabhadeva, next we find in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam the very wonderful history of the son, the eldest son of Maharaj Rishabhadeva, that is Bharat Maharaj. So there is the very wonderful history of Bharata in his 3 lives. From the 7th chapter of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam till the 15th chapter, till the 14th chapter of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Bharat Maharaj became the king of the entire world, and Bharat Maharaj was a very saintly king who ruled with the spiritual principles of the royal order of life. He was the ideal king, and therefore this Varsha, this planet, got the name as Bharatavarsha. After ruling for a very long time, Bharat Maharaj, being a very advanced personality in the practice of spiritual principles of life, he was also a very advanced devotee of the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, Shri Krishna, and by his great attraction, by his spiritual attraction to the Supreme Lord, Bharat Maharaj could give up all his earthly possessions, his worldly opulences, just like the Bhagavatam says. He gave up his huge earthly possessions, just like Malavat. Just like a person leaves the stool in the toilet and comes out. So he gave up his vast kingdom and all his earthly possessions. He considered them as insignificant, and then he went to the forest. He came to the banks of the very sacred river Gandaki Nadi, and he set up an ashram near the ashram of Pulaha Ashrama, near the ashrama of Pulaha Rishi, and then completely intensely engaged in worshipping the Supreme Lord Vasudeva Krishna, especially in his form as the Surya Mandala, as the Surya Narayana. Now, when Bharat Maharaj was engaged in his spiritual practices, one day, Bharat Maharaj saw that a lion was chasing a pregnant deer, and the deer was running very swiftly, very fast to escape the attack of the lion. And as it jumped across a small stream, at that time it gave birth to its child, and then began to still run away, but the lion caught it and the deer was killed. Meanwhile, the small child, the poor deer cub of this deer, was flowing in the water in a helpless condition. Bharat Maharaj, being a very compassionate person, he immediately went and rescued the deer, this deer cub, and he brought it to his ashrama, and then began to raise this deer cub as his own child. So after some time, this small tiny deer started to live in the ashram of Bharat Maharaj, and being a very small child, as children are very lovable, very adorable with their various pranks, and so even this small deer cub was very lovely, very adorable, and it used to come and sit on the lap of Bharat Maharaj, and when he used to engage in his spiritual practices, this deer cub would come, and in course of time, the attraction of Bharat Maharaj became more and more deep rooted towards this deer cub. Bharat Maharaj had already left his family, his children, and his entire kingdom had taken the path of Vairagya, renunciation, and had come to the forest. It was not wrong on the part of Bharat Maharaj to be merciful or compassionate to this poor deer cub. But the mistake committed by Bharat Maharaj was he developed excessive material attachment to this deer cub. So much so that he practically neglected many of his spiritual practices. His spiritual dedication became slackened, and he would spend a lot of time and energy with this deer cub, with this child of the deer. One day, when he was engaged in some spiritual activity, again the deer cub came, and Bharat Maharaj became a little annoyed with its behavior, that it is not allowing me to properly practice my spiritual vows, and he slightly admonished the deer cub, and the deer cub became very upset, and it left the ashram of Bharat Maharaj. And after some time, Bharat Maharaj again began to look around and observed that the deer cub had not yet returned. Now Bharat Maharaj became filled with great anxiety that such a poor deer cub in such a helpless state, where it would have gone, where it might have been attacked by some ferocious animal in the forest, what may have happened to it. And thinking deeply in this way, he set out in the forest in search of this deer cub. And as he was searching everywhere in the forest and was unable to find the deer cub, his thoughts in great anxiety became more and more intense. And as he was searching everywhere, he suddenly fell from a cliff and he fell down and died in deep thoughts of the deer. And in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, text number 6, Krishna has declared, Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers at the time of one's death, one is sure to attain that state in the next life. And according to this principle, Bharat Maharaj became in his next life, he took birth as a deer. But because of his spiritual practices and spiritual advancement, he could remember all the incidents of his past life. And in this life as the deer, he could remember how because of this one small mistake, he fell down from the spiritual path and had attained again another life in this material world. He had missed the goal of attaining moksha or liberation and had now come to the status of again becoming a deer. But because of his spiritual advancement, he could remember all the previous happenings and incidents. And now, in the life of the deer, he was very alert. He did not make any material, he did not develop any material attachments, he did not become overly attached to his deer family, nor did he make any deer girlfriends, nor did he enter into householder life as a deer. So he was quite detached, and even as a deer, as he grew up a little, he immediately left his home and came to the same place on the banks of river Gandaki to Pulaha Ashrama. And there, finally, in the association of the great sages and personalities, he gave up his life. And in his third life, Bharat Maharaj was born as a very advanced spiritual personality known as Jada Bharata. Jada Bharata is the third life of Bharat Maharaj. And as Jada Bharata, he got the name, his name is Bharata, but he got the title as Jada because he was completely aloof from all material conditions and all material activities. He would deliberately, he presented himself as a dumb, ignorant person so that people would not induce him, would not trap him to again engage in the materialistic way of life. So in order to escape from this materialistic way of life, Jada Bharata remained completely aloof, acted almost like an insane person, like a madman. So he was, after his father, his parents passed away, his brothers treated him, they ill-treated him, they treated him very badly. He was dumped with a lot of work, and they would just give him some little food for his subsistence. But Jada Bharat never protested. He took all this, but he completely remained in his divine, spiritual and devotional consciousness. One day when Jada Bharata was guarding the fields as a duty that was entrusted by his brothers, it so happened that there was a gang of dacoits, and the leader of the dacoits had decided to perform a puja of a worship of Narabali, a human sacrifice to worship and please Mahakali, Durga in her ferocious feature as Kali Mata. So this is a very, very wrong and a misguided and a tamasic form of worship. This is not actually worship, but some people are completely misguided. So the leader of the dacoits had decided to perform a Narabali, a human sacrifice. The gang of dacoits that he had sent to catch a human being who would act as a sacrificial being. They had caught someone, but that person had escaped, and now they were searching for another human being to act as the Narabali, and somehow they came upon Bharata, Jada Bharata, who was guarding the fields. So they caught him and they brought him to the leader of these dacoits and presented him. So he was now prepared, he was decorated in their concocted ways of worship. Jada Bharata was now brought before in the temple of Mahakali, of Kali Mata, and as he was about to be sacrificed at the altar of Kali Mata, Kali Mata, Mahakali, also being a great Vaishnavi. Another name of Durga Devi is Vaishnavi. She is also a great pure devotee of the Supreme Lord Vishnu, and she is also the personification of the external energy, the Bahiranga Shakti of the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Energetic Lord Vishnu. So now Kali Mata could not tolerate this events that were happening right in front of her eyes. These most degraded dacoits were going to kill a Mahabhagavata, a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. Kali Mata could not tolerate, could not control herself. She emerged out of the deity and along with all her assistants and killed all those dacoits along with their leader. And after that, Jada Bharata went away from that place. And as Jada Bharata was just traveling on a path, at that time, the king of the land, the king of Sindhu Desha, whose name is Rahugana, he was going on a palanquin, and again it so happened that one of the palanquin bearers had escaped because he was too tired, and now the other palanquin bearers were having difficulty to carry the palanquin, so they were looking out for a strong person who could assist them in lifting the king's palanquin. So they found again Jada Bharata on the path, on the way, and they caught him and they forcibly engaged him to lift the palanquin to become the palanquin bearer of Maharaja Rahugana. But now Jada Bharata, being a very, very compassionate, self-realized and God-realized soul, he saw that on the path there were many ants. So in order to avoid stamping and killing these poor innocent creatures, Jada Bharata was walking in a wobbly way, and thus he was causing disturbance to Maharaj Rahugana. So Rahugana inquired why, and he reprimanded the palanquin bearers that why are you carrying in such a manner? This is very uncomfortable. So the palanquin bearers explained that we have a new person and he's walking in a very funny, in a very strange manner. So King Rahugana again reprimanded Jada Bharata, but when he continued to carry in this manner, Rahugana could not contain his anger and he came out and he severely chastised Jada Bharata with many harsh words. At that time, in reply, Rahugana, in reply to Maharaj Rahugana, Jada Bharata just spoke some very important spiritual topics. And hearing them, Rahugana was immediately alarmed and he realized that this person is not an ordinary person but a very advanced spiritualist, an advanced transcendentalist. So Rahugana immediately offered his respectful obeisances unto Jada Bharata and begged his pardon, his forgiveness, and then inquired to explain whatever he had told in more detail. And after that we find the very important instructions given by Jada Bharata to Maharaj Rahugana. So we find in the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam from chapter 10 onwards up to chapter 14, in 5 chapters, the very wonderful spiritual conversation and discussion in which we find the sublime teachings of Jada Bharata to Maharaj Rahugana. In 5.12.12, Jada Bharata instructs that Rahugane tattapasanayati na chejya nirvapanad grihadva na chandasanaiva jalani suryer vina mahat Padarajobhishekam, that one can attain the supreme realization in spiritual life only by the mercy of the lotus feet of a pure devotee. So in this way, many important instructions were given by Jada Bharata. Jada Bharata also explained the position of this material world as a very great forest, the forest of enjoyment, and how all the living entities are lost in this thick jungle, the forest of this samsara, the material world. And only a qualified guru or spiritual master can act as the perfect guide and compass to bring the people lost in the forest of this samsara out of this predicament and show them the path of liberation or moksha. So now Rahugana was perfectly instructed by Jada Bharata and he attained self-realization. And now finally Jada Bharata in his 3rd life as Jada Bharata, he attained the ultimate spiritual perfection. He attained liberation, moksha, and went back home, back to Godhead, to the spiritual world, Vaikuntha Loka. Now after the description of the character of Bharat Maharaj and Jada Bharata, next in the 16th chapter of the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the very interesting and the captivating description of the structure of the universe, of the Brahmanda. So first there is the description of the Jambu Dvipa, and Jambu Dvipa is very nicely described that in the center of the Jambu Dvipa is the Meru Parvata surrounded by the Ilavrata Varsha. In Jambu Dvipa there are 9 Varshas, Ilavrata Varsha, Bhadrashva Varsha, Ketumala Varsha, and then on the north there are Ramyaka Varsha, Hiranmaya Varsha and Uttara Kuru Varsha. To the south there is the Hari Varsha, Kimpurusha Varsha, and then there is the Bharata Varsha. So Meroho Dakshine Pakshve, to the south of Meru Parvata is Bharata Varsha, and then it is surrounded by the Lavanodaka, the saltwater ocean. And further we find that the 7 islands that surround them are the Kushadvipa, Pushkaradvipa, so after Jambu Dvipa come the Sapta Dvipas. The Sapta Dvipas are mentioned to be the Plaksha Dvipa, and then the Shalmali Dvipa, Kusha Dvipa, Krauncha Dvipa, Shaka Dvipa. Then is the 7th one is Pushkara Dvipa, and after the Pushkara Dvipa is the Loka mountain range, and after the Loka mountain range is the Aloka Varsha, and after the Aloka Varsha is the covering, the first covering of the universe, or the shell of the universe. So in this way, this is the horizontal map of the Bhumandala, or this Brahmanda, which has a diameter of 4 billion miles. So then there is also the vertical plane of the universe, which is also described. All the various grahas and nakshatras are also explained in the text of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are very, very wonderful information that we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam about the cosmology of the entire universe. So the Vedic cosmology has the perfect, the ultimate and the complete description of the entire universe. There is also the description of the heavenly planets of the various of the Bhuvagloka, then the Swargaloka, Mahagloka, Tapoloka, Janoloka and the Satyaloka, as well as the subterranean planets, the lower planetary systems of Atala, Vitala, Sutala, Tala, Tala, Mahatala, Rasatala and Patala. And after that we also have the description of below Patala. Below Patala, to the west side, is the place known as Samyamani, which is the capital of Dharmaraja or Yamaraja, and below Samyamani are the 28 varieties of Narakaloka, or the hellish planets, known as Raurava, Maharaurava, Suchi, Kantaka, Kumbhipaka, and all varieties of hellish planets. For various sinful activities, there are various hellish planets. And in this way, with these descriptions of the entire universe, Shukadeva Goswami concludes the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. If you have any questions about the subject matter of today's discussion, you are most welcome to post your questions on the WhatsApp group or in the comments box. Please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please do join us for the continuation of the study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.